Gauteng government is planning on tightening bylaws to tackle rising cases of suspected food poisoning. Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi says there's a need for a uniform approach when it comes to food safety in the province. He says spaza shops and other businesses will be affected. And the Premier is actually joining us now in studio. Premier, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. So after all of the councils have adopted the new bylaws, what happens on day one of the implementation of those bylaws?
There'll be a clear law enforcement.
Yeah.
Because the problem is that we've got three categories of municipalities in our province. We've got our metros, which is your Tshwane, Ekurhuleni, and Johannesburg, and we've got our districts, which is West Rand and Sidibeng, and we've got our local municipalities, so Mohale, Midval, and Merafon. So you had different bylaws at a different level. So now that we've adopted what we have adopted, to me it's an indication that law enforcement agencies have no excuse now just to go in there and ensure that there's uniformity across the province.
Yeah. So what would be different this time around? Because remember that we had legislation that was already there in place that should have avoided some of these incidents. How will it be different this time around when you say law enforcement will be working?
It's different because we have got one law across the province. We didn't have that. We had different bylaws depending on the municipality. But the good thing as well is that we've got a developmental approach because we also need to give those that are not registered an opportunity to present their matter. You can't run that on common sense, that we know these are sponsor shops and therefore they must be eliminated. We say that register. If you don't register, law enforcement agencies come in and ensure that. But you don't suspend law enforcement because the Constitution is still there and many other laws that we have as a country. But we're excited that all municipalities adopted this approach, and we're also excited that it's a national guideline that we are the first province to officially adopt it. We are giving it to municipalities to implement, and we are also identifying the capacity of each and every municipality because we need to get the inspectors that are legitimate, that are appropriately qualified, that have the capacity also to check this thing. And we are pleased, albeit late, that at least there is this intervention.
Yeah. Where will this money be coming from, specifically now looking at enforcement and the inspectors, that particular element, because that was an issue that was raised before?
No, we've got the capacity. Yeah. We've invested in the law enforcement capabilities. You know, it's just that people didn't understand what we were doing. I mean, we've got almost 11,000 wardens that can go to any ward, any area, any time. You've got almost 7,000 per metro, the metro police, and you've got almost 18,000 or so SAPS. So we've got that capacity. It's just that we needed coordination. So we're meeting every Tuesday, 6 o'clock, where we coordinate our approach so that we don't duplicate, but we supplement the work that we need to do. And we're also bringing the private sector, which have been more than willing to also give us that additional capacity. So in terms of law enforcement, I'm quite convinced that we've got the relevant numbers and the appropriate muscle for us to tackle this problem.
Okay. The criteria that would be used for the spaza shops to re-register, what are we looking at here?
It's very simple. Yeah. You have to outline what you are selling and who is the institution that is providing that stock that you are buying. And at the same time, you have to meet the regulatory or compulsory things where you are selling, it's clean. You've got the necessary approvals in terms of the town planning, and you also have the necessary capacity to run that business. Yeah.
So does this include issues around permit as well? Who gets a permit? Who qualifies for a permit?
Yes, it includes that, but remember that is done by a different arm of government. The Home Affairs is the one that must deal with that aspect, that we are in the country correctly, and indeed we've got the necessary permit to be in the country. But what we need for our own sake is for you to comply with bylaws of the municipality, and the bylaws of the municipality is that you are trading at the appropriate place where you are allowed to trade, which is very important to us.
Yeah. So in terms, again, on criteria, who can own and run a spaza shop?
Whoever that is here legally and whoever that has the capacity to
and this includes foreign nationals, right?
If they're here legally.
Yeah. So one of the points that Commissioner Mtombeni raised yesterday was that if you look at the country's legislation, refugee as well, especially with the refugee status, somebody gets a refugee status, the rights that they enjoy, because the country doesn't have, in terms of its foreign policy, camps for refugees. Do you think that that's perhaps maybe something that needs to be revisited?
Remember, if you are here for a specific purpose, for example, you are a refugee, there are many things that you can't do. And that's the reason why we believe that we need to intervene there. And if you are here with full citizenship, there are things that you can do, and there are things that you can't do. For example, you can't participate in some of the activities of voting or be representative in parliament. So it's the segmentation that we really need to strengthen, and these bylaws assist us with that. And that is why, if you go through those bylaws, it's not about provincial government only. It's the Department of Home Affairs, Competition Board, Trade and Industry, Health Department, and many other departments, because we need to work with something that binds all of us. And it's for the very, very first time that we've got a document that stipulates this department must do X, this department must do Y, this department must do Z, so that in our intervention, we all know our roles, so that we don't just rush there, all of us, and try to intervene on something that is out of our either mandate or out of our corridor. So that's the reason why we felt we need to have this adoption as a provincial government, but also adoption as local government, so that we can have a uniformity across the province.
But is there a need to revisit that foreign policy that South Africa doesn't have refugee camps, which means that refugees are integrated into the communities, and sometimes it does lead to tension itself?
To be quite frank, it's beyond my mandate. I don't want to enter that space.
But what's your observation as Premier of Gauteng, the most populous province in the country?
I'm reluctant because I participated in the process that I don't know where it is now. All provinces were consulted by the former Minister of Home Affairs on the visa regime, because we had so many visas. You know, you have a visa to study, to work, and all these other things. And there was a process that was at the tail end. Unfortunately, when the 7th administration came now, that process was canned. And I've never had satisfaction on the reasons why it was canned and where it is. So that is why I say I'm reluctant to enter that space.
Yeah, but is it a concern for you?
It is. You can't just have anyone interacting with our communities, or you can't just have anyone, you don't know their status, you don't even know a reference point on how to attend to their needs or to their issues. You go to our health institutions, you go to our schools, and you all go to our community facilities. You can see that the presence is indeed widespread. So you needed some form of regulations. And as I said, the previous Minister of Home Affairs introduced regulations that we actively participated on, but unfortunately, we don't know where the process is now.
Okay then, that is the Premier of Gauteng. We continue the conversation with the Premier, considering other interventions as well that has been called for. The Department of Education in Gauteng saying that it will be banning all food sales in and around the schools, particularly to deal with these incidents of contaminated food. We continue the discussion with him after the short break. Stay tuned. And welcome back. We continue our conversation with the Premier of Gauteng, Panyaza Lesufi, on some of the interventions that they want to see at a local government level when it comes to dealing with the issues of contaminated food being sold at the local spaza shop, and also the implementation of the new bylaws that have been gazetted by the government, by the Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister. But broadly speaking, Premier, is the issue around if we look at the township economy and how the township is structured, and we also speak about this apartheid spatial planning, is that for the longest time, black South Africans living in townships, the majority, had to rely on each other, Babu Busbansbani and Sun Store and tuck shops and so forth. But the infiltration of foreign-owned shops has meant that lots and lots of local-owned spaza shops, unfortunately, are squeezed out. It's the nature of business. Sometimes these things do happen. But the inverse effect of that is that essentially what has happened is that when it comes to food security in the townships, that has been now left in the hands of foreign-owned shops.
Well, it's not that element of infiltration by foreign citizens, but it's also big businesses. I mean, there are lots of big businesses that invade the townships. And it's a double-edged sword. We appreciate that because it creates opportunities, but it also closed down Ubabu Store, Ubabu Mgudi, and many other things that have the shop. So that's the reason why we felt we need to produce a piece of legislation as Gauteng, we call it the Gauteng Township Economic Development Act, to ensure that those that comes to invest in the township can develop those that have been there before, because they created the market, they created the space, and we don't have to disadvantage them. So we are pushing that legislation so that they can. But there are many shops, me and you know, there are things that you could only buy from Amanina, you can only buy from small businesses. But you go to some of shop brands, they already sell Amanina, Maguinya, they've packaged them and increased the price. So it's a combination that we need to be careful of and manage it. And we really believe that our Township Economic Development Act will allow us to have an influence so that we compel you, when you come and invest in the township, to take care of those that have been there before. But also as regulations, and that is the route that we are taking. If you can't regulate that industry, our people will be elbowed out.
Does government take some responsibility around that responsibility, specifically now when you speak about big business as well, big business moving into the townships, because those licenses would have been cleared by government itself, the very same government that says that it is pro-poor and pro-black?
No, we have to. I mean, we can't shy away that we have to take some form of blame. It can't be free for all, especially in a sector that needs support, in a sector that needs protection. I mean, Nabobumguni, during those dark days, they didn't only provide support, but they also assisted us. Money could be transferred from the mines through them. If he's going through difficulties, you go to Mamguni and say, Mamguni, Babu Mguni, can you borrow this stock for me until Ubaba Figa will be in a position? And they've played a crucial role. So we can't shut them down. And we can also superimpose restrictive ways of operation, because that's another element. We've got so many restrictive ways that makes it difficult for them to cooperate. And that is why it will be easy for them to lend out, to lend the stores to foreigners and just get rent for them to survive. So it's a combination of many things, but our act that we've passed as a Gauteng government will address those gaps and limitations and then level the playing field appropriately.
With that said as well, how then do you deal with the hawkers? We've just spoken now about the decision that has been taken by the Gauteng Education Department when it comes to the selling of food in and around schools, suspending those or banning those for now. Do you know how long that is going to be in place for? And at which point do you say, now let's reintegrate the hawkers back into the system? But what happens to their livelihoods in the meantime?
Well, it's safety first. You don't want to regret when children pass on. The reality is that 80% of the children, 441 of them, 80% was around school premises. So you can't ignore those statistics that are there. But at the same time, you have to balance with livelihood of people that are selling. I mean, I'm a product of that. My parents were selling outside the school premises. So when the Department of Education made this proposal, I said to them, consult the sector, ensure that even if we've passed the legislation, consult the sector, they can assist us to develop a mechanism that can manage that situation on our behalf. Because we are not there, we can't police them, we can't manage who's selling them. They know who's selling, they know who's new, who's old. and they can be in a position to identify people that are selling things that are not right. So we are putting systems to go and consult the sector between now and this week. And,
but the ban is already in place.
As I said, it's safety first. What we do, you have to protect the children first and then deal with the situation that...
So the ban has been put in place without the consultation?
I suspect purely because on the basis of the number of deaths and the number of sicknesses that people have. People felt that let's have a safety first and protect our children and then go back, consult the sector, and the sector will give an input. It's very important that you consult the sector. But at the same time, lives come once. You don't want to risk the lives of your children. And if you check the age group, it's between 6 and 9. These are children that you need to protect and you need to ensure that they're not harmed or they're not exposed to things that harm them. And at the time the Department of Education took that decision, unfortunately, they didn't know the source, and they just felt that let's protect the institution, and then we'll be in a position to clear areas of deep concern. Yeah.
So does this mean like a tuck shop that is opposite a school would no longer be allowed to operate? How does it work?
I don't have the logistics. That is why I said let's go and meet with the sector. I've asked the minister, the MEC responsible for education, and the MEC responsible for economic development. Let's go and meet the sector and ensure that the sector is on board. They are parents as well. They've got children as well, and they know we are facing a serious danger here where 23 of our children have died. We can't just say it's business as usual. There needs to be an intervention, and this intervention must also ensure that it protects the livelihoods of those that are products of this thing. As I said, my parents were selling outside the school. That is why I'm here now. So I can't close another child that needs to benefit out of this process. But we are confronted with a situation where children are dying, and majority of those children that have stomach aches, that are vomiting and having this stomach ache around the schooling environment. So protect the schooling environment first, and then deal with the consequences of some of the areas that we need to accommodate. But I'm very sympathetic to those people. I'm one person that believes the hawkers need to be protected. The hawkers need our support, and the hawkers need to be developed so that they move away from being hawkers to be appropriate people that can sell products.
Yeah, because they're also part of a society, unfortunately, that doesn't create enough jobs. The question that we're running this morning, we're asking our viewers, do they believe that Gauteng government's ban on the sale of food in and around schools will stop the poisoning incidents? And look at that overwhelming majority there, Premier. 69% say no, it won't work. So there's a lack of confidence already in this particular idea.
As I said, it's safety first. You are damned if you do it, you are damned if you don't. You've got 441 children that have stomach aches, and of the 441, 80% are around the school premises. What do you do at it? You fold your arms and close your eyes and say, this is how it should happen. It can't be. We need to protect our children. And a society that does not protect its own children doesn't deserve to be a society. So it might be a harsh decision, but was very important, especially when we've lost 23 lives already, that we don't have to increase those lives, and whose child must pass on for us to understand that this is a serious situation. So I really believe that we need to have the combination of the two, indeed safety first, but at the same time ensure that the sector is consulted, the sector is supported, and the sector's voice is heard. Don't close your ears from listening to this particular sector. And to me, as I said, it's a crucial sector. There are many people that are in universities today purely because they are funded by that sector. And you can't just close it down the way we've done. So we just need to go and consult and present an alternative. As I said, they are parents themselves, and they know the dangers that we are facing now, and they need to assist us to eliminate those dangers.
Okay. Just another quick question. This is in relation to water, another basic right, basic commodity, and the various metros have been struggling. The Minister of Water and Sanitation has spoken about this as well. But then on top of that, for Gauteng, is the difficulty, the conflict between Eskom as well as Joburg, the city of Joburg, and the money that is being owed to Eskom. The Minister of Water and Sanitation last week, when we were speaking to him, he was saying that for him this is a big concern, because even when it comes to electricity, it means that some of the reservoirs won't be able to operate optimally because there's a threat that Eskom could switch off Joburg.
Well, it's a long matter that I've personally been dealing with it. The previous minister who passed on, Minister Pravin Gordhan, brought it to my attention. It's a dispute that needs sober heads and mature people to handle it rather than rush to have this kind of stalemate that we have. It's already in court and we've been managing it so that we can find a solution. Eskom believes that they are owed, and then City Power believes that they also have carried some responsibilities on behalf of Eskom, and they really believe that Eskom should also reimburse them. And they want to deduct what they feel is due from Eskom, from the debt, and that has been the center. But I'm happy that the minister went to address the Lekgotla of the Johannesburg municipality over the weekend, and I'm quite convinced that the solution will be found on that aspect. But going back to the water one, I must be honest, Aldrin, it's serious. It's serious. It's very serious. We have a huge risk facing us directly. Unless we take drastic decisions, which might not be favorable, but we have to take them to safeguard the system, we're going to find us in a serious position. Yesterday, we convened an emergency meeting with the mayor of Johannesburg and the minister, because if we can't manage Johannesburg, 80% of the water that we have in our province, we're going to have difficulties. The system now is under severe pressure, and Rand Water made a presentation that, I must be honest, compels us to take drastic decisions in the next 48, 72 hours. If we can't take those drastic decisions, already we have seen so many people carrying buckets, so many people don't have water in some areas and the strategic centers. That's the situation that we have. And there are three areas that have caused this. Is overconsumption. We are consuming more than what is provided to us. Two is accountability of the water itself. There are lots of water that we can account for. And thirdly is old infrastructure that needs to be overhauled and be either maintained. So the combination of the three has necessitated that we just have to review. We introduced level 1 restrictions. No one is adhering to them. And we need to reduce consumption as speedily as possible.
What do those drastic measures look like?
They're very drastic, and that is why I felt that let's go to each and every municipality. We met Johannesburg yesterday. We're meeting Tshwane later, and we're going to meet Ekurhuleni before we meet the district office. Even if the proposal that Johannesburg have put on the table is that between 9 o'clock in the evening and 4 a.m., we might have to restrict the flow of water in our province. And you know, there are hospitals, there are hospitality industry, hotels and other things that it might be very, very drastic. So their proposal is something that we feel that it's doable, but let's be careful. Let's ensure that we have a communication strategy. Let's give everyone a second chance, especially citizens, businesses, and big industries, that we have to reduce consumption. The consumption is just too much. We just have to reduce consumption, monitor that situation, and if we can't reduce consumption the way we want to, unfortunately, those drastic systems need to kick in, because the system is overburdened and we might have to defend the system because if it collapses, it will create problems. And there are many other reasons. For example, you know, the Lesotho Highland, the area that we get Lesotho have shut down. So the flow of water as well, there's a limitation until 2028. So we just have to manage what we have now sparingly. We don't have to misuse water. We don't have
How soon can we expect the final decision to be announced?
Well, we are meeting where the minister is going to make an announcement today, later this afternoon. I'm going to join her together with the executive mayor of Johannesburg, because Johannesburg, it's massive. If we can control Johannesburg, we really believe we would have made a proper intervention. And don't want you to do any other thing. Just reduce consumption and ensure that you don't misuse water, and monitor the situation in the next 72 hours. If that does not work, unfortunately, new restrictions have to kick in and to safeguard and to protect the entire system.
Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi, appreciate your time. As you heard